Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and I'd like to tell you about the next dither in my succession of dithers that I'm putting out. And this one is called Spatialize. Now here's the deal with Spatialize. This is why it exists. Suppose we're doing dithers, right? And we've got this sort of thing going on, triangular probability density function. The idea is that it makes a continuous noise level, kind of like, say, this, and has that noise level unvarying no matter what's happening behind it, and the sound fades through to silence underneath it. Now there is a drawback to this. If you have waveforms that are coming through, like say they're coming through on a line like this, and then one of them just happens to exactly coincide with the position in the output scale, in the bits, the odds that you're going to keep that, settle on that, are not all that great. You're adding up to 2 bits of noise to it, so it could be anywhere. And it's purely on a statistical basis that your values are going to end up where you think they're going to end up. And that's the idea that gave rise to what I called contingent dither. The idea of contingent dither is that, say, sketch with the pencil again. If I can afford better visual aids, I will, but for the time being, it's pen and paper. If you have to end up on these values, and your waveform is sort of swooping through like that, you can add an enormous quantity of dither and just settle on having a statistical basis that winds up there. But what if you took moments like this, where it's exactly halfway, and did something more along the lines of trying to just divvy between both? Technically, if you have a succession of values that are just like this, they're alternating between a bit level, your output level should look like that. It should be possible to make the output play something that's a smooth line or a smoothish line between the lines. Unfortunately, this is insuperably difficult to do. It's not really very practical. It's certainly not what we do in digital audio in normal terms. Of course, I've never been that worried about normal terms, so I decided to try it. What contingent dither was about was settling on the points where we had a crossover of the values you want to get out and having the probability of randomness drop to virtually nothing at that point. And when we had the points directly between the two, the probability of randomness expanded outwards until it was roughly a bit in size. And I think I also have some of this switching back and forth, but you can't do too much of this because it interferes with other frequencies in the sound. So what we end up with is a funny sort of thing where let me just sketch this out. We've got the points where it crosses over and there's very little randomness there, and it'll expand outwards to the halfway points, and then as it nears one of the sides, the randomness will decrease again. The dither noise is contingent upon whether the value that you're settling upon needs to be dithered in order to be accurate. Now there's pluses and minuses around this. One minus is that it's got all of the problems of flat dither and more. If you remember, when we talk about flat dither, the issue with that is that if you bury stuff in flat dither, it will vary its level. It'll sort of shift and change and sputter, whereas TPDF doesn't sputter at all. It's completely consistent. But both TPDF and flat dither will put as much as a bit or 2 bits of pure noise into the signal that you want, even if the signal was going to settle upon something that was exactly right. So that brings us to Spatialize. This is a dither where this noise that you get backs off when the variable, the value, is approaching the final points, and if it's going to be between the 2 points that it'll be quantized to, then the noise will kick in. And what we get when we start sneaking this up out of silence is like this. Note that that was nearly silence. Let's compare that with another behavior. We'll compare it with truncation. Truncation is the thing where if this music is playing and we reduce it to silence, it'll hang on in a really loud, ugly, horrible sound for a long time until it finally quits. At least at a purest gain, because purest gain slow fade will slowly go to 0. So you get this. Or we'd get this if I turned it on. Here. You shut it off, and it's still making awful noises for quite a long time. And then it cuts off abruptly. Whereas if we have Spatialize, and we cut that off the same way that we did before, it's kind of dropping into the background, but is still sort of present. The way the contingencies settle upon these statistical distributions of waveforms means that we have a similar behavior to what truncation does as far as forcing audio to come in, but it's way quieter, it's way softer, the tone is closer than what you'd get out of truncation by a long, long shot. It's kind of like that. But the real point of the exercise is comparing it on actual audio versus TPDF. Because you can hear we've got a sound, we got a noise, and then TPDF is a louder noise. But this isn't wildly different. In fact, it's not super different from flat dither. It's maybe a little softer. It doesn't have to be a full bit in depth to do its thing. But if we put music in, and say go with our 16-bit normalized thing where we're going down to 16 bits so that we're listening to an 8-bit audio, and then you compare that with we can hear the noise of the TPDF dither, and then switch it over to Spatialize. Listen to the reverb tail on that little noise. In fact, I think I can even repeat it so you can hear it plainly. I'll scooch it over so that it's Even closer to that. The reverb tail of that drum head. Here's TPDF. Remember the reverb tail. And it's supposed to sound like this. Now listen to what Spatialize does with it. We can hear sort of the ambience around that reverb tail more than usual. And again, if we do things like truncation, it's a sort of gruesome grind. TPDF. With that, you can sort of hear the reverb tail in there, but it's washed away by this rush of noise we've got here. Whereas Spatialize I feel that's a little bit more of a sense of the atmosphere of the reverb tail. The distance is preserved a little bit better. It's got a little bit more spaciousness to it. So when we switch back and forth between the ordinary sound and Spatialize, I'll see whether I can find a place with more reverb in it. Size of everything anymore. It's gotten smaller. We've lost stuff in the noise. Whereas you go to Spatialize, feels like it's retaining more of the space in the mix, which is why we call it Spatialize. And then even as we drag it down to incredibly quiet levels, compare it to TPDF, and then that's a little smaller, that's a little flatter. SpatializeDither, folks. Probably around 4-bit now. Back to TPDF. And just a lot flatter. SpatializeDither is free because my work here is supported by Patreon. If I get enough people to just sign up on Patreon and kick in just $1 a month, I should be good to go. There's enough people out there using these types of tools. So SpatializeDither, as a sort of quick précis here, is not as technically perfect as something like TPDF, because TPDF is a theoretical perfection that makes trade-offs of its own. It will preserve, the fading off into the noise floor more cleanly than anything fancier, with the caveat that stuff is going to get kind of flat, stuff is going to get kind of covered by the noise. The noise is generic digital noise that doesn't sound very good. And you can do more interesting things. And again, one of the things that Spatialize does is tries much harder to have sample values that are supposed to be on one of the dithered places. Like, it's going to converge to these lines. If it's already on this line, as far as I'm concerned, it should be on that line. It shouldn't be on an adjacent line just because dither noise says that it should. The dither noise should cut out, and that does mean that it's not going to have as invarying dither as other things. It's actually been maximized a little bit so that the dither noise doesn't sputter too much. There's a lot of work that goes into these things. It's a balancing act. But Spatialize works much harder at placing sample values that are close to where they already should be, in the final output. I quite like it. Might not be my very favorite dither of mine, but I quite like it, and other people have liked it as well. I think I showed it to Bruno Putzis once, and he thought that it was pretty cool too. And again, Spatialize is free. All of these recent dithers run at 24-bit by default. As you can see, it has no controls on it. If you want to make it do a 16-bit, use bit shift gain minus 8 bits, SpatializeDither, and then plus 8 bits, and then you can truncate it to 16-bit output, and you're just fine. I hope you like this dither as much as I do. It's got its points, and I'm not quite finished. I've got another dither to go, but I do hope you like this one. Thanks.